Welcome to my channel, Tech Lounge.
Hello, dear colleagues. Today we'll learn how to engrave text onto a part using FreeCAD. There are many videos about this topic on YouTube. However, when you sit down at your computer, open FreeCAD, and try to follow the same steps shown in those videos, you'll often encounter different behavior along the way, and eventually the process comes to a halt. There are basically two main reasons for this. The first is the difference between the version of FreeCAD used in the video you watched and the version you are using. There's no solution for that here. The second is that FreeCAD can behave differently depending on certain characteristics of the part being edited. The purpose of this video is to explain why situations like these occur and how to deal with them. As long as you model exactly the same part using the same reference plane and in the same direction, and on the same face, you won't run into any problems. However, when you take a real-world part and follow the same steps shown in that video, you've probably noticed that FreeCAD sometimes behaves in unexpected ways. Since I've encountered situations like these myself, it's very likely that you have too, or eventually will. That's why I felt the need to create this video. Today, we're not going to model the part you see on the screen. We'll leave that for a future video. Our main objective is to engrave text 0.5 mm deep on the front face of this part. That's why we are here. At the end of this video, you will learn a very useful way to achieve such tasks. To add text to a part in FreeCAD, we need to use two workbenches. The first one is the currently active Part Design workbench, and the second is the draft workbench you see here. We'll use the draft workbench to define the text content, its font, orientation, size, and position on the part. Then, using the Part Design workbench, we'll engrave this text into the part to the desired depth. As anyone with even a little experience in 3D modeling already knows that the first step when working on a part is to select the face you'll work on. The second step is to create the required 2D sketch on that face. Finally, the third step is to turn that sketch into a 3D feature by adding height or depth. For example, let's create a circular boss at this location on this face of the part. Step 1. Select the face. Step 2. Enter sketch mode. Step 3. Create the desired shape here. Step 4. Add height to it. As you can see, we've created a circular boss on one of the part's face. Naturally, when we want to add text to a part, we expect the same workflow to apply. Meaning, Step 1. Select the face where you want the text. Step 2. Enter text sketch mode. Step 3. Define the text's position, size, and content. Step 4. Give the text height. However, when it comes to text, that's not how FreeCAD works. As you may remember, I mentioned earlier that we have to use the draft workbench to create text. Once you switch to the draft workbench to create text, the face you selected beforehand no longer matters. The draft workbench chooses its own working plane. In other words, the face you selected in the Part Design workbench has no effect. Let me demonstrate this live. Right now, we want to add text to this part. First of all, the first step is to select the face where you want to place the text. Done. I've selected the front face of the part by just simply clicking on it. I'm currently in the Part Design workbench. To add text, I need to switch to the draft workbench. I switch to the draft workbench to create text. We'll use the icon shown here with the letter S. It's called Shape String. I click it. Then I roughly choose where I want to place the text on the part. For example, I'd like to place it here. I'll type test and click OK. As you can see, there is no text on the part. You might be wondering, what happened? Where did the text go? Actually, that's not the case. The text has been created, but instead of appearing on the front face, it has been placed on the back face, as you can see here. We started by selecting the face we wanted to work on. But the text ignored the face we selected, and ended up on a completely different face. So, when we switch to the draft workbench to work on a part, does FreeCAD randomly decide which face to use? Or is there a specific logic behind it? Yes, there is. When you switch to the draft workbench, the working face assigned by FreeCAD is actually the face you selected as starting face when you first created the part in 2D step. In other words, it's the base of the part. It's the plane you selected when you started at the initial sketch. If you built the part upward from this plane, then for operations in the draft workbench, the active working face will automatically be the bottom of the part. If, however, you built the part downward, treating this plane as the top, the active working face in the draft workbench will still automatically be the top face of the part. In industry, building a part downward from the initial sketch plane is generally not considered good practice, except in very special cases. As you can see here, this part was built upward from its base face in given thickness. So its bottom face is currently regarded as the active working face, meaning base, for the draft workbench. Therefore, for this part, when we switch to the draft workbench, operations are performed not on the front or top face or any other face, but on the bottom face originally defined will be the active plane for subsequent operations. In fact, if you've noticed, when we switch from the part design workbench to the draft workbench, a grid is placed automatically. Although, when viewed from the front, it may appear to lie on the face with expect to work on, but once we rotate the part, we can clearly see that the grid is actually on the base, or the back face from our point of view. What does this tell us? It tells us that all subsequent operations performed in this workbench will take place on the side where the grid is located. At this point, let me be the one asking the question fired in your mind. What if we want to work on a different face of the part? Are we stuck using only the base face of the part? The answer is simple: of course not. We have two options. The first is to move the grid to the face where we want to work. The second is to move the text to the desired face. The first approach usually does nothing except confuse FreeCAD for future operations, because the conflicts between the original base and the new working plane created by moving the grid causes fights between them and rarely ends well. So the quickest and most reliable method is to create the text on the face preferred by the draft workbench, and then move that text to the face where you actually want it. So, how do we do that? Let's find out. I'm in the part design workbench. I've finished creating my part. My modeling is complete, and now I want to add text. Since FreeCAD requires a layout for any text engraving, we need to utilize the specific set of geometry tools first. To do that, we switch to the draft workbench, where we'll define the text's properties like size, font, position, orientation, and content. As you can see, as soon as I switch to the draft workbench, a grid appears automatically. I now know that this grid is not on the face where I want to work, but on the base of the part, which is the back face. So there's no need to panic. To avoid having this grid distract us while we're working, we can turn it off by clicking here. There we go. Now we have a clean view. Let me rotate the part so we're looking at it from the front. Now the part is facing us. To create the text, click the icon marked with the letter S in the draft workbench. This is called shape string or shape from text, depending on your user interface style. Next, click approximately where you want the text to appear on the part. In my case, I want the text to appear down here, so I click approximately in this area. The next thing I need to do is write the content of the text. Let's say, Tech Lounge. Then I click OK. As you can see, the text isn't visible. But I still don't panic because I know that, since the grid is on the backside, the text has actually been created at the behind of the part. Now, if we look over at the panel on the left, we can see the text object we just created at bottom of the list. Our next task is to define the position, size, font, and orientation of the text. These properties are managed directly through the object's parameters, which are located in the left panel. To do that, I click once on the shape string entry in the left panel to open the parameter window below it. Then I enlarge the parameter panel to make it easier to work with and to see all the settings clearly. As you can see, there are many settings here. At this point, there's an important detail you should know. The text we've just created has 0 thickness. In other words, at the moment, it is neither embedded into the part nor does it protrude from the surface. Think of it something like a shadow. Just as a shadow has no thickness, our text currently has no thickness either. The first thing we'll do now is move this text, which was created on the back face, to the front face of the part. Instead of manually dragging the text, FreeCAD allows us to reposition objects accurately by altering their spatial coordinates. To achieve this precision, we need to access the object's alignment settings. If we look at the parameter panel on the left, we'll see a property called placement. When we expand this, we'll see several additional parameters more. The one we're interested in is the position parameter below. When we expand it, we can see the current coordinates of our text along the X, Y, and Z axes. To better understand how these changes affect our model, a different perspective will be helpful. Now let me rotate the part slightly toward the front and raise it a little so we can clearly see the result from the front. Okay, everything looks good from here. Now I'll increase the Z value to move the text to the front face. I set it as 1 mm above the base. As you can see, it's no longer on the back or the front. It's now inside the part. Since the part is 2 mm thick, the text is currently centered within its thickness, making it invisible to us right now. When I change this value to 2 mm, the text reaches the front surface of the part and becomes visible. Now the text is right in front of us. By the way, remember that it is a still 0 thickness object. Now just for fun, let's see what happens if we change the X and Y values. Keep in mind that the directions represented by these X, Y, and Z parameters will change depending on the initial plane the part was drawn on. As you can see, changing the X value results in the text moving left and right for my part. If I want to move it forward or backward, I simply change the Y parameter. Let's look at the text from the side. Right now, the value is 2 mm. If I increase it, the text goes above the surface of the part. If I decrease it, it goes into the center of the part and eventually starts coming out through the back. Let's change this value back to 2 mm. Now, the text appears again on the front surface of the part. Just like that, our text is right where we want it. Let's move on. Besides that, we can also adjust the size, font, or orientation of the text. Notice the parameter labeled size. This parameter controls the size of the text, which is currently set to 1 mm. Let's play with this value a bit and see what happens. I'll change it to 3 mm. And as you can see, the text has become larger. Now I'll bring it back down and restore the original value, because that size was exactly what I wanted. In addition, there is one last parameter here that we're interested in. Inside the placement settings, the angle parameter allows me to adjust and change the orientation of the text exactly like this, increasing the value. Now, I'll also set it back to its initial value of 0. Better idea. I'll simply type 0 manually to speed things up. Okay guys, we're finished with the draft workbench now. We've created the text, positioned it where we want it, adjusted its size, and set its orientation. We're done here. Now let's return to the part design workbench to embed this text into the part. Now, we are in part design workbench. Before we continue, there's a highly important, high priority step we must take to avoid running into any unexpected problems later on. In the model tree on the left, you can see the text object we created a moment ago. Directly above it, there are the other objects created when I first modeled this part. They are all listed right here inside our tree view on the left side. Notice that the text object isn't aligned vertically with the group above. It's slightly indented to the left. That difference has a specific meaning, revealing to us a lot. It tells us that the text object is still independent and has not yet been attached to the main part. You can verify this in another way. At the top of the list is the name of my main part. And beneath it, you can see all of its associated child objects and individual features from the model I created earlier. Each item has a small triangle on the left of it. When I expand one, its child objects appear. Now, clicking it again collapses it. The others work the same way. Now I'll click the triangle next to the main part's name to collapse all of its all-child objects. There it is. All child objects of my part disappeared, but the text object is still visible. That means the part and the text object are actually two separate, independent objects. We shouldn't move forward without establishing a connection between these two objects. If we just go on, the engraving process won't apply to the main part. So let's attach the text object to the main part. First, I'll expand the list again. Then I grab the text object and drag and drop it onto the main part's name. As you can see, the text object now has the same indentation as the other objects under the main part above. We are almost there, and now we just have one final step left. That is reflecting the text onto main part. I select the text object by clicking it. Then from this menu I click the pocket tool above. A panel opens on the left, and a red preview appears on part view. Let's examine it. I'll tilt the part upward to get a better view. As a preview, the text we created is now extending into the part, using the default depth. The extrusion depth shown in the left panel is 5 mm. This arrow shows the direction of the extrusion. Depending on your part's orientation, this direction may sometimes be reversed. Don't panic. If that happens, use the reversed option in the left panel to change its extrusion direction. That's it. In our example, default direction was already correct, so I'll turn that option off again. The left panel shows that the text will extend 5 mm into the part. Since my part is only 2 mm thick, setting it to 5 mm means the text will cut completely through it. Instead, I want the text to be engraved only 0.5 mm or half a millimeter deep from the surface. To adjust this, we need to locate the specific parameter box in the Properties panel on the left side of our screen. All I need to do is change this value to 0.5 mm. Then click any empty area. Let's look at the final result from the side. As you can see, the text is ready to be engraved 0.5 mm into the part. Now I click OK. And when I rotate the part, you can see that our text is engraved 0.5 mm deep. If we zoom in a little more, we can see more clearly how the text is engraved into the surface. To verify that the engraving depth is indeed 0.5 millimeters, I'll click any of these lines and check that 0.5 millimeters dimension at the bottom of the screen. Let's click another line. When I click any of these lines, notice the 0.5 millimeters dimension as shown below. As you can see, each of them shows the same 0.5 millimeters engraving depth. Now let's apply everything we have learned, and for example, engrave a part number as vertical text on the other wing from scratch, in just a couple of minutes. As part of the initial setup, I position the part like this. I'll engrave it here. I switch to the Draft menu, click the Text tool, and click roughly here. Let's enter a part number. I'll enter the part number 023-14R2, then click OK. As expected, the text has been created on the back side of the part. I open the Properties panel. Under Placement, I expand Position and increase the Z value. This moves the text to the front surface. Then I adjust the angle. I'll enlarge this slightly. Now the part number is in place. That's it. I'm done here. The text size looks good and the font is fine as well. So there's nothing else to change. Now I switch back to the Part Design workbench. I attach the text object to the part. Then I use the Pocket tool and set the pocket depth to 0.5 millimeters. Then I click OK. And that's it. The part number has now also been engraved. Our logo is on the right wing, and the part number is engraved on the left wing. Congratulations! Alright everyone, that brings us to the end of this video. Please don't forget to subscribe to our channel, leave a like and share your thoughts in the comments. Thanks for watching. Take care. Goodbye.
Tech Lounge.